We had a client already owned the property, purchased the property already. They came to us wanting to get a duplex on the property. Now, this is a whole family, but within the family, you've got three separate parties, right? So you got a husband, wife, father, whatever, and all really enthusiastic and ready to get going to get this duplex done. Can you get us the planning certificate? We'll have a look, etc. Get the planning certificate. The property is not even zoned for duplexes.
Wow.
Not even zoned. Forget the rest of the assessment that you do where you check for hazards and easements and restrictions. The property is not zoned for a duplex. Sometimes you've got to be the bearer of bad news, shattered. But then, we try to give alternatives, but, when sometimes clients have their heart set on a particular development, yeah, it's disheartening to see.
Welcome to Vision Boards. I'm your host, Eddie Saglam. Every episodes we try to bring experts here to make you better decisions with the financials, property and business. Today, guest is Emin from Yaz Design. He's a building designer and a director. Can you just tell about yourself a little bit and your company?
Yeah, look, so from a young age, I worked alongside my father a lot. I learned a lot about the industry from him. My father was the type of builder who had quite high attention to detail. And besides learning about, the industry from him and being exposed to the industry from him, I learned a lot of work ethic from him. So I employed that in, my own life path. Eventually, through my father's guidance, I got into design and architecture. I studied at university while working for my father, which was really helpful. So, as I was studying, I could put real life examples to the theory that I was learning.
It is a big advantage, actually. Like I met over the years a lot of architects and draftspersons. They on front of the computer, everything works really good.
Yeah.
Right. But if you don't know what's actually happening on the job site,
yeah,
it's you make the life harder for the builder, but the both sides. That's really good.
Yeah, and that's something I was very grateful for because I used to make a joke. I used to say my father was an encyclopedia.
Okay.
I could ask him any question, even relating to my degree, and he'd be so helpful. So I was very grateful for that. Eventually I worked for a number of firms. I interned. I learned a lot about the process involved, more than just the design work. There's quite a significant planning process. There's a whole client journey from initial engagement with the client, figuring out what's their brief, what's the scope of the works, is the project feasible, taking you all the way through to the design. Beyond the design, there's also consultants involved, and then you have to deal with either your private certifier or council. All along the way, there's such a journey that takes a certain amount of time. And while interning for these companies, I was really exposed to a lot of different scenarios, a lot of different issues, a lot of different types of projects.
A lot of headaches.
A lot of headaches, but I used
you learn from that.
I used to put a mental checklist and say, okay, great, I've done a DA duplex, or I've done a DA, boarding home. And I just go, great, okay, I've done that. So now I can draw on from that. And, during that internship too, I mean, you're not really accountable in a way, you're observing. So you're lucky that the responsibility is not on you when these issues arise. But there's a lot of issues that do come up, but it's such an industry that I think people sometimes simplify.
You talk about the feasibility. So with a simple way, how you describe what is this? What is a feasibility?
So feasibility is saying if essentially if your scope or what you want with the project lines up with what you can get on the project. What people need to understand is that every property needs to be looked at individually. So there's no blanket rule across multiple sites. Every subdivided lot needs to be assessed individually. What are we assessing? We are assessing firstly, two documents that relate to the property. One is a 10.7 planning certificate, parts 2 and 5, and a title deed. Title deed will show us if there's any covenants, restrictions to the property. Sometimes that could, get in the way of a customer wanting to do a duplex on the property. A planning certificate, which is a bit more of a denser document, would tell us firstly, it would tell us what planning legislations apply to the property. What zoning is the property in? Are there any hazards that affect the property? Bushfire, flooding, landslip, for example, just some.
Any easement, anything?
Easements you'll find on your title deed.
Okay, that's good.
I mean, there's different types of easements. So, a drainage easement.
Yep.
And again, like just to pull one example, that may make or break a project, whether you have a drainage easement or not. There's even easements where you don't benefit from, but obviously you can't build over the easement. So there's a lot of things that we extract out of those two documents to determine if the client can do what they want.
So, like when I'm talking with the clients, generally they want to do a project before I come to you. So we've been working with Emin for years. Before I come to you, I just basically ask those documents as well. And the way I explain them is your title is basically your identity of your property.
Yep.
And to them to understand a little bit simpler, and so your 10.7 is like an ancestry check. Yeah. So you can basically get more details about the property. Without that two documents, you can't make any decisions.
Otherwise, everything's a fantasy then.
Exactly. It's just it stays in a plain stage, and you can't go any further.
Yeah.
When people looking for buying a property, so what they should look at it.
So obviously, look, you'll get your contract of sale from your agent. What I would say is, firstly, working chronologically with the contract of sale, have a look at your title deed, see if you see any covenants, any restrictions, any easements, and make sure that, there are the supporting documents for those restrictions, so you can know exactly what is the restriction. Look out for your planning certificate, though most of the time with the contract of sale, you'll only find a part 2 of a planning certificate, which is, let's say, half the document.
Yep.
We do need a 2 and 5. We need the complete planning certificate to make a proper assessment.
How people get that?
So we can get that for our clients. We encourage them to jump on our website, follow the prompts, and click Start a Site Assessment Report. So we'll order that for you, but if you do want to go seek that out yourself, you can hop onto your local council's website, just follow the prompts, look for something called 10.7 planning certificate or section 10.7 planning certificate essentially, and you should be able to easily just follow the prompts. Council's more than receptive and more than helpful to help you out.
It generally takes like roughly around 5 days in majority of the councils, as far as I know.
Depends on the council. Some councils are pretty quick. Some councils you can even order it in the morning, get it in the afternoon, which is really good. But yeah, some councils can take a week.
So let's say we are talking about the scenario. The buyer basically did all that all that stuff and by themselves, but how important, I know, but like for the viewers, I'm asking that question, how important, if you're planning to do some scale of work in the property, so this is not just a house you're buying or the land you're buying and then you're using for your own purpose. So you have a plans for maybe you wanted to extend the property, or you want to do the major renovations with the property, or you wanted to knock down, rebuild, or you want to build duplexes. So before you purchase the property, how important is working with someone professional, and can I say working with someone from the beginning can save you tens of thousands, maybe even up to millions.
Yeah, millions. I put it in the millions. Look, I have many case studies of people who have suffered financially because of not doing the proper research and homework. How significant is it? I mean, look, to draw on from past examples, I've had some past clients that we've worked with, but, maybe got comfortable, can't say why, didn't do their homework. And, this is a couple of years ago, but till this day are still stuck with those properties, not being able to do what they wanted to do.
Wow, okay.
Whether they're trying to rent it out, renovate it, but you can imagine these are people who had the intention of snowballing, right? Wanted to flip properties, wanted to get on, right? Increase their wealth, fair enough. But these people till this day, I'm talking years ago, are still stuck with these properties. It's completely capitulated the whole idea for them. It's completely put a stop to their entire journey. We're talking significant financial issues from not doing proper research.
Do you have any other examples? Hey, obviously you can't give the names, but
definitely. Look, so one example that comes to mind is we had a past client of ours that we had done a duplex for. This particular client wanted to do CDC only duplexes. They wanted to get in and get out quick, fair enough. But obviously there's a whole feasibility tied to that. Does your site qualify for a CDC? Now, this client, I was overseas at the time, but I still kept contact with the client through WhatsApp. The client was interested in purchasing a property that was going to auction the following week. Obviously, feasibility takes a bit of time, but sometimes, the cost to do your research is much cheaper than the mistakes that it can cost you. Obviously, time was an issue, but look, nonetheless, we said, hey, give us a contract of sale. We'll have a look in the meantime. Obviously, you've got to wait for council to give you a planning certificate. Had a look at the contract of sale. Didn't really give us, the full extent of the information that we wanted. Hence why we say title deed and 10.7 planning certificate with parts 2 and 5. Didn't have the part 5. Client still went and ordered the part 5. Part 5 came back a day before auction. The part 5 showed that the property was bushfire affected. Now, without getting too technical, if your property is affected by a certain bushfire level, CDC is off the table. This client's only option was a CDC. I guess because of the time constraint. Fair enough. Our advice was, look, standard procedure, we have to engage a bushfire engineer to give us a BAL assessment, which is a bushfire attack level assessment. If it comes back a certain range, CDC is not feasible. If it's below, great. They
went and bought the property.
They still decided to go and purchase the property, engage the bushfire engineer, and sadly,
it's higher.
Probably in the worst zone possible.
Wow. Okay.
Which was kind of obvious, but I think I don't know. I can't say why this client didn't heed the advice. But yeah, till this day they're stuck with that property.
It's like people getting too confident. I think it's one of the biggest problems after a while.
Yeah, because you imagine you do the first and it's such a smooth journey. But I think a bit of complacency, they think, oh, okay, great, I can jump to the next one and not do what I have to do. But I think there's a discipline to running feasibility. You have to stay disciplined. It's a minor cost to save you from such a catastrophic mistake in the future. Another example that comes to mind, and this is actually quite recent, we had a client we never met before. So this was a pure, lead for us. Already owned the property, purchased the property already. And they came to us wanting to get a duplex on the property. Now, this is a whole family, but within the family, you've got 3 separate parties, right? So you got a husband, wife, father, whatever, and all really enthusiastic and ready to get going to get this duplex done. Great. Can you get us the planning certificate? We'll have a look, etc. Get the planning certificate. The property is not even zoned for duplexes.
Wow.
Not even zoned. Forget the rest of the assessment that you do where you check for hazards and easements and restrictions. The property is not zoned for a duplex. Sometimes you've got to be the bearer of bad news. Shattered. But then, we try to give alternatives, but, when sometimes clients have their heart set on a particular development, it's disheartening to see. But yeah, so you can imagine, like, this was a purchase that was done with 3 parties within a big family, and thought, here's our ticket to, retirement, or for some people it was retirement. For some people in the family, it was about, just having this sort of forever home sorted out and get on with the rest of their life. And yeah, this just put a whole stop to it.
I want to talk about a bit more your architectural sides as well. So where the design process actually starts. Where you start that?
Obviously, look, starts with feasibility. But once we've established feasibility and things look good, we always we break it up into 5 stages. We start with stage 1, which is a project analysis. This involves us organizing a surveyor to come out to site, involves if there are Sydney water assets or sewers underneath, getting a service location report done, getting a geotechnical assessment done of the property, and obviously us coming out to site. We come and investigate the site, factoring in the findings from the survey, service location report, and the geotechnical engineer. You'll notice we're not even talking to the client at this stage. This is purely us understanding the site. So we go ahead and do our site analysis, gather all that information together. Then we go and sit down with the client. We have a design brief meeting. The design brief meeting with the client is where we start to ask in more detail what are the things that they're after. So obviously knowing, for example, well, hey, I'd like to do my forever double-story home with a basement here. Great. We start getting into the nitty-gritty. So, how many bathrooms, how many bedrooms, what is the style idea? What is the idea that they're after? We essentially paint a clear picture before we put pen to paper, so that stage one, at the end of stage one, it looks like we've got an idea of the site. We understand what the restrictions are. The client is made aware of those restrictions, but the client also has informed us of what they're after. Go on to stage two, where there's concept design. So purely looking at it from a floor plan, schematic design. We test how rooms function with each other, right? Again, it's purely looking at it from a floor plan perspective, understanding how spaces relate to each other. Are we achieving that open floor planning that they're after? So the vision starts to kind of take shape from that stage. It'll go into stage three, where there's a detailed design development. So at that point, that's really where your elevations, your 3Ds get developed, and the full architectural plans get developed. In this stage, though, something I'll make a note of, what we like to do, because of our construction background, we like to bring on the builder during this stage to give their advice. Look, for people that are doing renovations on their properties, people that are, really want everyone's expertise in the mix. This is a massive opportunity at this point. So the builder comes along with one of our design workshop meetings. We're presenting the plans to obviously the client and the builder. The builder gives their opinions. We make some changes if need be, but essentially the builder knows what he's up for before the project even gets approved.
And also, I think it's really important because I've seen that many times, people going and doing all that work, spending all that money as well, either back in their mind, like 5 years ago, pre-COVID prices, they had some sort of a number in their head, or one family friend actually they told them it's like, it's going to cost you this much. They come with the number, as a number is like absolutely not even close what they're going to spend.
Yeah.
So I personally recommend actually we work that from the beginning together.
Yeah.
If the builder understands what they want as well from the beginning, it's like they can work with the architect together as well. I don't want to call you just an architect, because of the service you're doing is just that it's not an architectural. You're just basically taking care of the whole project from start to finish.
It's very similar to how a builder manages trades. You can imagine you've got to manage your carpenters, your plumbers, your electricians. We've got to manage our engineers. We've got to deal with council or the private certified. We've got to deal with our clients. How many consultants are there? We're managing all of these people and at the same time designing. So yeah, definitely. And you spoke about, budgeting essentially. I think that's one of the most significant questions we ask in the beginning is, what is your budget? And, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's good to get a gauge. And that's where, you guys as the builders having that conversation, that initial conversation with the clients is so helpful. A lot of it's just educating people.
But one of the things is I looked at it. Maybe that's why we are working really good together as well. That's one of the reasons, other than the personal level, but because of how your background about the building industry, because of the other works, obviously you've been completed as well. You know the cost.
Yeah.
All right. So if someone comes to you and say like, hey, I want to go a second story up extension, and my budget is $200,000, you'd be like, sorry, like it's not gonna happen. Like, you stop them at the beginning. At least you can give them some sort of a direction as well. That's really important because of the people always struggling with that as well. They can find they can contact with you. They can find the best architect they can work with. The person can manage everything for them. They don't have to deal with any of those problems. But when it comes to finding a builder, that's a challenge. Yeah. And not only that is it's not just only this industry. It's pretty much in everywhere. If someone's good, they're not cheap.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. I mean,
so
Ferrari's not cheap.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, he's not cheap.
What is one of the biggest mistake you see in a planning stage, or people making that mistake? Like,
yeah, look. Besides feasibility, there's so many just that come to mind, but. With the planning particularly, I probably more speaking to people in my industry who work in the similar field, people who haven't been exposed to types of projects and what the implications are, because there's no there's no rule book that tells you, hey, you're doing this kind of project. Here's what the implications are. Yes, you have your DA checklist. You can get your checklist of your certifiers, but there are things that will catch you out. So sometimes like inexperienced architects or building designers engage on a project that they don't know what the planning process looks like. They don't know what consultants are required. And then everything becomes a shock to the client of, hey, here's a new fee, here's a new consultant, here's a new issue that gets in the way of the design. So again, why our process, stage one, establishing the proper project analysis, we have an understanding exactly of what the restrictions are of the property, what you can get, what you can't get, and what do you want. Tying all those together, then it makes the conversation and it makes the process so much more smoother. Besides, planning, there's obviously, graphical issues. So details that aren't clear from drawings, not enough dimensions placed, builders having to work out certain things on site. And then, obviously having to call the architect and say, look, this doesn't make sense on your plans. What is this?
What about the clients? Like they generally, I'm guessing, is they generally coming to you as like what they have in their minds. Yep, all right. So I want to have like, let's just talk about the duplexes or the new builds or knockdown rebuilds. A bit more straightforward, like when it comes to the design side of it, because of you're working with a black canvas.
Yeah.
So it's easy to start from the scratch. But when you're working with the existing building, and what did you see is like as a big problems or the big mistakes people making is like big dreams is one of the mistakes?
Definitely. I think people not understanding the implications of what their vision is and what their property can withhold. So sometimes there's people who look, they have a certain budget in mind.
Yep. Okay.
Their vision doesn't meet that. Understand that when we say implications, I mean, we're talking about, look, we're dealing with an existing skeleton of a building. And sometimes, people have visions, they want to go extremely high ceilings or, concrete first floor slab. And then what does that do to the engineering? So from a design sense, we can design within our parameters, but then there's a engineering factor to it. I'm not an engineer, but it's one of the biggest issues I see is that then the engineer starts to question, how are we actually going to do this? How are we going to bring in these beams into the existing dwelling or the columns or whatnot? So I think...
Or how are we going to support the second story?
How do we do it? So the best thing you can do as a prospective buyer or as a client is have a chat to your builder as soon as possible. Have a chat to get an understanding or gauge how realistic the ambitions are. Obviously, bearing in mind your budget.
As soon as you have your vision or your dream turn into a vision, and then you're planning to actually start on the project, you have to work with the expert. Doesn't matter who it is. Like, because if you first find a builder, the proper builder is going to directly straight away to an architect and an engineer and then start that process. And the same thing with if you're dealing with a proper engineer or an architect, they're going to say the same thing as well. Hey, you got to speak with this. I've seen this a lot. People, especially right now, as people wanted to go work with the existing houses, they wanted to extend the house. They want to be different reasons. Like either they love the property, they living the streets, the kids' school, so many different reasons. And I make that conversations and pretty much every day with them. And I said, okay, so what's your reason to stay in this house? Like, do you really want to spend extra $400,000 for this property and 6 months to 9 months of a renovation process? You have to rent somewhere else as well. Or you just sell the place, put that money on top of it and buy something ready for you. But if they have the right reasons, okay, we take the job, we take the project. But and I can say it's like 6-7 times of 60 to 70% of the time, it's people always thinking if they want to go upstairs, like going a second floor, they're like, okay, they're just going to remove the roof and then they start
that's
building.
Funny enough, I don't know why that's a misconception.
Yeah, like and then when you start explaining, hey, no, it's not going to work like that. We have to work with from the ground first and then going up.
Of course, you've got a whole another level you've got to support on your existing foundation.
So, but we can probably say that's one of the reasons we're doing this as well. It's education.
Absolutely.
We have to educate the people so they can understand what's the process, how they're going to start the process, what to follow. What's the one renovation you do in the property is always, we can say almost adds a value?
Yeah, definitely. Look, always, getting your certain amount of bedrooms, definitely. There's some properties that even you and I have worked on together that sometimes only 2 bedrooms on the entire property, and we work together and we turn it into a 4-bedroom home.
Yep.
Imagine the value just in that alone. Something significant as well is if people can achieve a ground floor guest bedroom with an ensuite for 2 purposes. One is that obviously you've got an aging population. Some people want mum and dad to come live with them. They want to give them comfortability. Fine, you've got an ensuite that's dedicated entirely to their bedroom. The guest bedroom becomes their bedroom. Dynamics are changing even with the way people work today. A lot of people work from home. Some people treat that guest bedroom as an office. It adds significant value. We speak to a lot of real estate agents in different suburbs, and that has been probably the one most common theme amongst all of the feedback from Central Coast all the way down to South Sydney is if you can achieve a guest bedroom with an ensuite on your ground floor, huge value. I would say also, depending on the locality, obviously demographics and dynamics change in certain areas, but a typical thing we see as well is if we can achieve an upstairs rumpus. A rumpus is a massive thing for a lot of people, especially families, an area for the kids to just go and play away from the living room downstairs with mum and dad. That's one thing. Definitely having obviously a walk-in robe with your master, that's a must now. A lot of the older designs we see where there's only one little wall dedicated for a built-in robe. Imagine the living dynamics between, say, you and your partner, and us men, probably 25% of the robe, and
I'm a bit opposite, but anyway,
like 20% for sure, a lot of it. But yeah, look, accounting for those things, like a his and hers walk-in robe. An ensuite that, some people like the double ensuite sinks, dedicated for livability. Those are small things that can, uplift the value of a property.
What about wasting money? Like where people generally, from your experience,
getting emotional, definitely, about the property. So over-capitalizing on structures, especially structures. I'm not even getting into the interior. So, some people get excited and say, hey, look, I want to, do a first floor concrete slab. I love the rigidity of a concrete slab. There's many alternatives, Hebel, aerated concrete, etc. But then what are the implications of you doing concrete to the rest of the structure? Double brick walls on the externals now, single skin brick on the internal walls. Now everything's load bearing. There's a huge construction cost to that. And that'll blow your budget right out. I have an actual project that we're working on currently where, look, we are doing a sort of recessed basement into the ground, not entirely a basement, but, a little bit elevated off the ground. But there is a significant amount of excavation involved. They really wanted this basement idea, not just limited for the vehicles, but beyond as well. You're dealing with an existing structure. It's a renovation project at the end of the day.
It's a renovation project? Yeah. Wow, okay.
Yeah. So imagine the implications. You're extending beyond. You've got the existing footprint on a home that's probably built, I don't know, I'd say in the late 80s, right? 90s perhaps. So imagine what the implications are for that. So then, but look, we have those conversations with the clients and we say, look, this will probably blow out of your budget. We try to give them that construction advice. Obviously, we're not builders, but, talking to you guys and whatnot, we can give that expertise to the client. And again, that ties into our whole process anyway.
So you're working with a lot of property flippers as well. So what do you see as like, what is the difference between designing a place for yourself or versus for flipping?
Yeah, definitely. Look, for flipping, obviously there's the investment tied to it. There's the financial side tied to it. So a lot of it ties around the conversation around the budget. So we're designing to essentially a square meter. What we do in the case of investments is we assess the property first. We see what does the property have and what can it get to add value to the property. So for example, the things that we're talking about, like, adding a certain amount of bedrooms, the guest bedroom with an ensuite, adequate enough bathrooms. If it involves, especially with the older homes, knocking out internal walls to create more of an open feel, has a massive psychological effect on the the livability of the property. So assessing the property for what it needs, speaking to your builder, speaking to your real estate agent, and obviously speaking to your architect or building designer. Those are factors that can definitely help you with property flipping. Designing for yourself though, the value in that case then obviously is client specific. So what do they deem as valuable to them might not be the same as to an investor. So then we really just we tailor the design around what they're after. Sometimes there's clients that are big movie fans and really want the media room and want it 6 meters wide, and fair enough. That's value in their eyes. So there has to be a distinction between the two, but at the same time, budget is probably the most significant topic we'd be talking about.
We talked about design. It's a value to the property. What should investors think about before buying?
Yeah. So first thing when looking at a property, the first question you've got to ask yourself is there room to improve the property, be it internally or perhaps knocking down partially and extending the footprint of the building. Seeing, for example, can I perhaps get a duplex on this property? Can I put a granny flat on this property, increase the rental income if that's my intention? So many factors that come into play, but you notice always stems back to the feasibility of the project. So getting that initial feasibility done and seeing if it lines up with your intention. Looking particularly at say a site. There's one that we're recently working on together. We noticed it only had, I believe, 2 bedrooms in total, right? So, but the footprint, the whole extent of the dwelling could accommodate easily for a 4-bedroom project. So, but imagine the uplift in value there, livability for someone with kids and whatnot. So, seeing a property if it needs or if it has room for improvement, what do you do? What is the extent of it? And making sure that it does all stack up with your budget as well.
All right. So, what would you never buy?
Wow, what would I never buy? Obviously, being in the field, I have a bit of an advantage. But one thing I'll definitely avoid is if it's my forever home, probably a flood-affected lot. And not in every case would a property be significantly affected. Sometimes it's very minor. But I would really like to avoid a property where I would have to elevate. We're talking in the scenario of if I have to completely knock it down and rebuild, I would have to elevate and keep the underneath of the foundation exposed. That to me is personally just a bit of an ick. I try and avoid bushfire, not even for the planning perspective, but obviously there's a literal risk there. Some areas are completely prone to bushfire, which is fair enough, but you try to put your measures in there to avoid the property becoming a bushfire hazard. Look, some clientele as well, depending on their cultural background, don't like, for example, if let's say there's a Sydney Water sewer running underneath the property, they don't like that being underneath their property, perhaps where they eat, where they sleep for cultural reasons, feng shui, right? So there's a lot of things that people need to be mindful of. But those are probably the flooding is one thing I really like flat sites. I don't like sloping sites. I think about stormwater as well.
Yeah, okay.
I see properties where, again, you can't have the best of everything, but I've seen properties where they slope to the back.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine on a really heavily rainy day, what that'll do. God forbid. But, and obviously, again, look, there's mitigation measures there. And that's where you want to make sure that, your design's up to par, but also the build quality is up to par as well, because then there's no issues at that point.
Everything is going back to doing your homework at the beginning. Absolutely. Because I'm seeing this pretty much every day, people getting excited. Yeah, all right, we are going an open house, we're going an auction. And so what do you do? Like, okay, you're going to buy this property, but like what you do, we did the building and pest. Okay, it's for the house.
Yeah.
What about the land?
Yeah.
You don't know anything about the land. You don't have any ID for the land. The ID card, maybe you say. It's like if there is anything you really like, for example, the flood, right? And you buy the property, you renovate the property, or you think it's a beautiful place, and then 6 months later, there was a flood, which happens a lot. So that's probably one of the most important things from my end as well. I always say that, like, as a building pest is definitely, it's a must, right? But you need to, you're spending millions these days. You have to spend that extra little bit of a time, make your research, do your homework, have a look at everything, and then after that, make your final decisions. And during that process, some of the stuff you don't understand, like not everybody is out there have the experience we have or the knowledge. So yeah, you might need to actually just call someone and say like, hey, I have this document, I don't understand half of this stuff in
take
here,
me through it, you know,
and tell me, exactly. Which is you do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why feasibility is the start of everything. But there's a lot of people that, you know, offer aid as well. Like council has duty planners. You can schedule a call with them. They'll give you a call back. Any questions you have about the property, hey, look, you know, what am I affected by? Or, they'll give you as much information as they can, but they're more than receptive to help you out. So definitely doing your homework before anything. I can't stress that enough.
What is the biggest mistakes you say the property flippers makes?
Definitely rushing into buying a property without doing their homework. I have seen it countless amount of times. And then you sort of have to deal with the emotional onslaught that comes after that, you know, what they anticipated or what they assumed versus what the reality is. You're in the firing line for that. I honestly, it's probably the biggest thing I've seen. Again, because not everyone knows what the process entails. Or in the case of our previous example, assume that it's always going to be a smooth process, maybe perhaps like what we had the first time we engaged with a particular client. Second time comes around, they get there's a bit of complacency, and then suffering greatly, and then that puts that whole journey on hold. Do the feasibility first. That's what I'm always going to say.
Absolutely. I remember probably around 2 years ago, I looked at 4 properties in the same day. It took us a while to organize all the real estate. Luckily, two of the property was the same real estate. So looking for a client. And they want to do the renovation. They like I did a project with them before. We are buying this house, one of these ones, and can you come and help us? Like, let's have a look at the property. And and I asked them, like, what is your order? Like, it's a 1 to 4. Let me know which property you prefer first, and then second, third, and then the last one. They end up actually buying the last one. The reason was the first 3 property, all of them was like heavily flood zones and then affected. So, but you can't, the real estate is not going to tell you that. The building capacity is not going to tell you that as well. Yeah. All right. So when we looked at it, we go to the same councillor. So when we looked at it deeply, it's like, here you go. This 3 properties definitely no, from my end at least. They're like, oh, okay, no, right, okay. We'll go with the last one. Doing your homework is probably the most important. Like I'm just keep repeating the same thing I know, but
you can imagine like let's talk about, for example, when there's a flooding scenario. Obviously, with the entire process and consultants and whatnot, you can imagine for property flippers, there's holding costs. So you're paying interest monthly, whatnot. You've got to factor in what process are you going through? Are you going through a DA, which may take some time, or you're going through a streamlined CDC, get your approval and your hands ready for construction in 4 to 6 weeks, for argument's sake? You can imagine how many people get caught out by that alone, because there's a whole department that needs to deal with the flooding aspect. And there's RFIs, there's back and forth between council and yourself during a DA submission. And these weeks turn into months, months turn into a year. You've got these holding costs to account for. So it's a massive thing. What
is the difference between DA and CDC? Could you please explain?
Yeah, definitely. I'll shed some light on it. So a DA stands for Development Application. That is a process that goes through council. You'll have to follow council's DA checklist to put in an application to council. It's generally a 2-part process with council. So, you submit your DA, it'll sit with council. Council may come back to you with an RFI, request for information. You'll go back and forth a little bit, and then eventually you get your DA approval. Now, I'm simplifying it, but that process alone can take you an average of 6 months. Again, it varies depending on council and the extent of works, but let's talk, residential, let's say 6 months. Eddie and I have dealt with a semi-residential commercial project that's taken almost 11 months. So once you do get your DA approval, you'll be in a position then to apply for a CC. A CC is a construction certificate. You get the rest of your documents, pay the required fees, and then you're off to construction. On the other hand, you have what's called a CDC, Complying Development Certificate. Now, why we talk so much about feasibility is because more than 90% of the time, clients want to know, does their property qualify for a CDC? They want the streamlined process. Between the DAs and CDCs, there's different design controls. So when you're looking at a DA, you're dealing with the local council's DCP, Development Control Plan. They have certain, design controls that you need to meet, whereas a CDC has what we refer to as the SEP, the State Environmental Planning Policies, and you need to then follow them. Different. One may be more advantageous over the other, but time seems to be the biggest thing that clients get drawn to, and hence why they would probably prefer the CDC pathway. Look, I've had clients that want to do their forever home. In certain councils, there's more leeway with certain design controls via the DA route. So they'd rather go through that. Fair enough, I can understand that. With the property flippers, investors, developers, etc., in the residential game, I can say the least, they do prefer the CDC pathway.
I want to go a little bit deeper on this one. Is there is a misunderstanding with the renovation side of it, or if you call it for the flipping. People think, it's if it is under the roof, if I'm changing the kitchen location, adding a bedroom, I don't need any approvals.
Yeah. Another thing is, for example, getting rid of internal walls. Like we've dealt with this number of times. Some walls are load bearing, structural.
Yep.
In those cases, it's not a free pass to just start knocking walls down and saying, I'm going to do what I need to do. That's why it helps to first speak to, your architect, your building designer, a builder, whatnot. I mean, a good builder will tell you, hey, look.
Technically, like if, let's say you have a 2-bedroom house, you're looking as a flipping project.
Yeah.
You have a 2-bedroom house, but there is a room in there.
Yeah.
I guess like you potentially can move a few things around, and then can add the third, maybe even the 4th bedroom.
Yeah.
You need an approval for this, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say yeah.
Yes.
And especially again, it depends on the council sometimes. Like even if you're adding another bathroom, there's an entire, this is getting out of Sydney now we're talking about, right? There's another process where any plumbing that you add to the building needs to have an approval for. So people thinking, I'm going to add a bathroom here, that needs an approval.
Yeah.
Changing windows and whatnot. There's a whole basic certificate, energy assessment that needs to take place. Is the property is it efficient with its energy output? There's definitely pays to know prior before we start knocking walls down.
When you think about the future, what do you think the properties, the house is going to look like in the future?
So what I think in the future, what houses are going to look like, we're already seeing it now with design trends and requests from clients, even from like EV vehicles and whatnot. A lot of people relying on solar, so solar stored batteries, being self-sufficient for energy. So I kind of see homes in the future being sort of hubs for self-sufficient energy, relying less on, the grid for power, making sure that the design accommodates for things like charging vehicles. Like that's something we're literally dealing with very new now. I mean, even in just this year alone, look how many, EV car sales there have been. That has an impact on the design. It has an impact on how we design garages now, even with electrical design. Are we accommodating for enough space and adequate enough area? Are we capturing enough of the sun through solar panels to provide enough energy to make sure that this property doesn't need to rely on the grid?
We had a lot of solar panels were in the market for a long time, but the battery is getting more affordable. That's why and that's another one. Yeah. Like you need to make sure you have room for that as well.
Yeah, look, there was this cool, it was actually from a solar company advertising it. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was completely AI generated, but the concept was cool. And what it shows you, look, design's going a different way. How design and requirements change over time. The changes depending on, the people's needs over time. But what I saw from this advertisement was, so the person drove in with their EV vehicle into what looked like a sort of detached garage, workshop, carport, completely detached from the home. That was the center of, the solar panels, the batteries, all the energy storing was done there. The vehicles were charged there. And then the house was kind of separate to that. But what it shows you is that there's a need for more space for these items. So,
And obviously, it's going to affect your designs.
Yeah, look, and an open-ended question I'll leave with is, what does the future of design look like then? What do the futures of properties look like? Lots that are small, lots that are large. What does that do to the design then? So that's an open-ended question. I mean, we'll see what happens.
All right. Before I finish, I always ask the same question to our guests. It's like, if you put one message to people's vision boards today, what would you say?
Do your feasibility. Come to us. We'll run feasibility. We'll make sure that the site qualifies for what you're after, and save you from a costly mistake.
For the people who wants to contact with you, we will leave all your details.
Yep.
But they can contact with you from your direct emails and
jump on our website. We've got a prompt that says "Start here." Anything, if you guys are after a site assessment, general inquiries, feel free to follow the prompts.
What is your website?
yazdesign.com.au.
Okay, awesome. So we'll leave all the details in the description. And thank you very much for joining us today. All right, like we shared a lot, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be really helpful to the people out there. Either they are looking for their forever homes, if they're looking for investments or flipping.
Yeah.
So at least they know now that one of the first thing they gotta do is, like, instead of jumping something on real estate, is like doing their feasibility. That's really important. Thanks a lot again.
Not a problem.
Thanks
Thanks for having me.
All right, bye.